On Friday, January 8th, 1999, an 8-year-old boy by the name of Leroy Brown Jr., BJ for short, and his 30-year-old mother, Karen Clark, became Bridgeport, Connecticut's latest victims of a violent crime. The deadly chain of events began 2 years earlier in the spring of 1997. Karen Clark met a man by the name of Rudy Sneed Jr. Karen and Rudy's relationship moved fast. Soon after they met, Rudy moved into Karen and BJ's home, and right after that, Karen and Rudy got engaged to be married. Rudy was a member of an organization that was known for selling large amounts of crack cocaine. The organization was ran by Russell Peeler Jr. and his younger brother, Adrian Peeler. Russell and Adrian's mother was a retired Bridgeport, Connecticut police officer. In the summer of 1997, Rudy and Russell fell out. Russell believed that Rudy was keeping money from the drugs he sold for Russell. Russell told some of his associates that he intended to kill Rudy because he was taking money from him. On the afternoon of September 2nd, Rudy and BJ were leaving a barbershop that they often frequented. As Rudy began to drive his car with BJ in the back seat, a vehicle drove up beside them and a man armed with a semi-automatic gun leaned out of the passenger side window and fired shots into their vehicle. Fortunately, Rudy and BJ only had minor cuts from the glass shattering. Rudy told the police that he was sure the gunman was Russell Peeler Jr. The police decided not to take a statement from BJ at that time. On September 26, 1997, Russell was arrested and charged with attempted murder. His bail was set at $250,000. Russell's bond was posted and he was released 2 weeks later. Rudy contacted the Bridgeport prosecutor, who at the time was Jonathan Benedict, 5 months after Russell was released. Rudy informed Benedict that Russell had been calling and threatening him at the home he shared with Karen and BJ. He stated Russell told him to drop the charges and forget what happened or face the consequences. Benedict states that he took that information to the judge who was presiding over the case and asked for the case to be fast-tracked. The judge agreed to fast-track the case. 3 months after the judge agreed to fast-track the case, the trial still had not started. On May 29, 1998, Rudy was hanging out at the barbershop, this time without BJ. A man with a hoodie over his head walked into the barbershop. He walked up to Rudy and shot him 7 times. A witness said that Rudy's last words were, "It was Russell, yo. It was Russell." A few hours later, Rudy died from his wounds at the Bridgeport Hospital. Although there were several witnesses to the attack, none of them were willing to identify Russell as the gunman. It was documented that a week after Rudy's murder, Karen Clark brought her 8-year-old son, BJ, into the Bridgeport Police Department to give a statement regarding the previous shooting that he witnessed. In July 1998, Russell was arrested for the murder of Rudy Sneed. In addition to Rudy's last words identifying Russell as the shooter, the shell casings found at the barbershop matched the casings recovered from the shooting where BJ was present in the car. Since the same weapon was used, the police believed that it was more than likely the same gunman. BJ Brown was the key to the state's case. Knowing Russell's history of witness intimidation, the prosecutor moved to have his bond revoked. The judge set Russell's bail to $900,000. 5 days later, on July 13, 1998, Russell's associates paid $50,000 in cash, which was the amount required. It was reported that the bond money was handed to the bondsperson wrapped in a towel. Russell was ordered to wear an electronic monitoring bracelet and he also had a curfew. At this time, Russell was not aware that BJ was a witness in his upcoming trial. The state's attorney's office took measures to protect BJ and Karen, but Connecticut did not have a formal witness protection program at that time. The state witness protection program stated that if a witness was testifying against a violent street gang, the witness was to be relocated and given police protection. But there was no requirement for the local police department or the state's attorney's office to offer these services. There was a patrol car stationed outside Karen and BJ's home, but less than a week later, authorities say Karen requested to end the police protection. It should be noted that there are no official records to prove that Karen requested to end the police protection. Karen's brother, Oswald Clark, does not believe Karen made the choice to end the police protection. Oswald believes the police department ended the protection, not Karen. Oswald stated that Karen was informed by a law enforcement officer who said that they would no longer be offering her protection. A few weeks later, on July 23rd, Karen closed on the purchase of a new house. A short time after she moved in, she saw Russell, who was still out on bail, outside of a crack house that was coincidentally directly across the street from the house she had just purchased. She called the state's attorney's office and informed them of what she had saw. Jonathan Benedict, who was the prosecutor, says his department offered to move Karen and BJ, but Karen declined the offer. Karen and BJ remained in their new home without witness protection. Now, we're going to leave July 1998 and fast forward to the fall of 1998. BJ had just started school as a third grader, and Russell's trial was approaching. Prosecutors say BJ's mother did not seem to be in fear, and she did not report any further incidents, but Karen's brother Oswald insists that Karen and BJ were living in constant fear. In August, after Russell pled not guilty to the murder of Rudy Sneed, the court required that discovery takes place within 45 days. This meant both sides would have to disclose the names, addresses, and statements of their witnesses. The prosecutor, Jonathan Benedict, did not want to put Karen and BJ at risk, so he delayed the discovery as long as he could, which was roughly from about August 1st until December 23rd, when they were ultimately required to comply with the law. It is reported that they only disclosed the witness statements. The court allowed the prosecutor to withhold the names and addresses of their witnesses, but obviously the damage was done because you can clearly figure out from the witness statement who the witness was. Remember, there was only one person with Rudy Sneed when his car was shot up. When Russell realized who the witness was, he began to get desperate, and he told his associates that he had to get rid of this kid. I would like to tell you guys that I have researched this story to the best of my ability, and the reports are very conflicting in this area specifically. Some statements say that BJ's actual name was never released, while some statements claim the assistant state's attorney did release BJ's name, but he gave an old address. The defense attorney, who is Russell Peeler's lawyer, Gary Mastronardi, has denied that he shared the information regarding BJ with Russell. On January 6th, Russell and his younger brother Adrian went to the crack house across the street from Karen and BJ's house to speak to Josephine Lee. Josephine was a prostitute and crack addict. Josephine states that Russell asked her if she would do him a favor. She said he asked her if she would look out for him and call him whenever Karen arrived home. She agreed, and in return, Russell gave her free drugs. The next evening, on January 7th, Josephine watched from her window, waiting for BJ and Karen to come home. Shortly before 6 p.m., she saw Karen and BJ pull into their driveway and begin to unload grocery bags. Josephine states she paged Russell and he called her immediately. She told him that they were home. Russell said, "Good looking out." Within 10 minutes, Adrian Peeler, who is Russell's little brother, was knocking at Josephine's door with a revolver in his hand. Adrian and Josephine walked across the street to Karen and BJ's house. Josephine knocked on the door. Karen asked, "Who is it?" Josephine replied, "It's the girl from across the street." Karen begins to open the door. As she's opening the door, Adrian bursts in and starts to chase Karen and BJ up the stairs. One shot was fired, which is believed to have entered Karen's abdomen. Adrian continued to chase Karen into the rear bedroom. Josephine states she heard some conversation about Karen or BJ being a witness in a murder case. Then she heard 2 more shots. Adrian then comes out into the hallway where BJ is lying on the ground and screaming for his mother. And Adrian fires 1 shot into his head. This is all according to Josephine Lee. The following day, on January 8th, when Karen did not show up for work, a co-worker went to her house and found the door open, and inside were the bodies of Karen and BJ. While canvassing the neighborhood, the investigator spoke with Josephine Lee. At first, she denied any involvement in the crime, but after several interviews by police, she implicated herself along with Russell and his brother Adrian. The FBI began investigating Russell on separate drug charges. They interrogated many of Russell's drug associates regarding Karen and BJ's murders. The FBI threatened to prosecute Russell's drug associates on drug charges. Many of them ended up cooperating and gave statements regarding what they knew about what had happened before and after Karen and BJ's murder. Unfortunately, there was no forensic evidence that tied either Russell or Adrian to the murders of BJ and Karen, but the statements of their drug associates, including Josephine's eyewitness statement, gave the state enough evidence to charge Russell and Adrian with murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and since killing a minor is a capital offense in the state of Connecticut, they both faced the death penalty. In September 1999, Russell Peeler was convicted of Rudy Sneed's murder and was sentenced to 105 years in prison. On May 2nd, 2000, Russell's capital murder trial began for the deaths of Karen and BJ. Josephine Lee was the state's star witness. She was an eyewitness to Russell's planning and organizing the crime, but the defense attorney tried to discredit her testimony due to her long history as a drug addict. The mother of Russell Peeler's 3 children testified that at a Christmas dinner in 1998, Russell told her to get out of town. She said he told her things are going to get hot and witnesses are going to die. Russell's drug runners also testified that just 2 weeks before BJ's murder, Russell told them that he wanted BJ dead. The jury began its deliberations on June 4th, 2000. 4 days later, there was a verdict of guilty on all counts. The jury was not able to decide what his sentence should be. Due to the fact that Russell was not the person who actually pulled the trigger, the jury could not decide if Russell should receive the death penalty. After 4 days of deliberating, the judge stepped in and sentenced him to the death penalty. More than 10 years after he was sentenced, certain laws had changed, and he was then resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of release. On January 16, 2001, the alleged triggerman, Adrian Peeler, was on trial, also facing the death penalty. On March 3rd, 2001, the jury found Adrian Peeler not guilty of capital murder. Instead, he was found guilty of the lesser crime of conspiring to commit murder and was sentenced to 20 years. He was also sentenced to 35 years for drug-related charges. Those years are to be served consecutively. As a result of this terrible tragedy, the state of Connecticut created the Leroy Brown Jr. and Karen Clark Witness Protection Act. This Witness Protection Act gives witnesses a variety of protection options, including family relocation, direct police surveillance, and requires the state's attorney's office to provide a 24-hour telephone number to call for assistance if they feel threatened. The law created a new offense called witness intimidation and made it a Class C felony, punishable by a fine of up to $10,000 and a 10-year prison term. And it appoints a victim's advocate to oversee the protection of witnesses. The law authorizes the Department of Revenue Services to investigate the origin of any cash bond exceeding $10,000 in criminal cases involving drugs, threatening a witness, physical assaults, or murder. The Leroy Brown Jr. and Karen Clark Witness Protection Act gives judges the right to deny bail to defendants who are seen as a danger to the community. And it also allows a judge to withhold the names of children who are witnesses in violent crime cases.